When it comes to game releases, there's a lot that go under a lot of people's radar. Whether they were not what people were looking for, or they weren't marketed all that well, these games are some of the most fun experiences you can find. Keep in mind that there are people who don't enjoy these games, and that's totally fine, but the people who do will get a lot of enjoyment out of them. Underrated games are honestly up to your personal opinion, so if you don't enjoy any of these games, you are free to have your opinion on them. But these games are some of our most underrated games out there, and consider them some of our favorite games of all time. They just weren't as big as some other games. So here are our 9 most underrated games of all time. The Middle-earth games are some of the best action RPG games out there, and has the combat that's very similar to the Batman Arkham games. The games are made by Warner Bros. Game Studios, and are extremely unique when compared to other games. The really cool aspect of them is that they're actually canon in the Lord of the Rings universe, and believe us when we say that Shadow of War's ending is absolutely insane if you are a fan of the franchise. They also have a very unique gameplay mechanic that they actually patented called the Nemesis system, which has a randomly generated set of orcs to be placed in a hierarchy. If you defeat one, then a new orc will take their place. If you die to an orc, that orc will get promoted and become stronger. It's a mechanic that can keep you occupied for a ton of hours if you are solely following the system. The combat and story are also very polished and great. You will even run into character multiple times that you probably know from the Lord of the Rings universe. You can get both games for very cheap, and if you didn't play Shadow of War because of the launch issues when it released, but you're happy to say that it is a completely different game from when you played it.
Is that really my job?
Your job is whatever I say it is. Look, the closest ranger is like 2 days away. Go down there and set him straight.
Firewatch is quite literally a walking simulator that explores some deep concepts as well as some slightly disturbing ones. You play as a park ranger stationed in a tower in the woods, watching for fires out in the middle of nowhere. You only have contact with a woman who is in a tower a few miles away, and you talk to her on your walkie-talkie rather than in person. Somehow, the game crafts an intriguing story with you not even seeing people face to face, and the relatively short time to beat makes you wish that there was more. I won't spoil it, but even just taking a peaceful walk through the woods leads to encounters that you probably never expected. It's a game that I personally look back on fondly, and I wish that I could experience the game again for the first time.
Fear, hate, those are the only flowers your compassion may grow.
Vampire, or Vampire, some people call it, has got to be one of the most unique open world experiences I've ever played. I may be a little biased in this regard, but Vampire was severely underrated. I think what really brought that game down for some players was the fact that the story was a bit skim and the combat could be repetitive sometimes. However, if you get further along in the game, you really start to see some cool mechanics and the story does pay off in the end. One cool feature is that you can actually play the game however you want. For instance, I played the game and ended up with a good ending, while Chug, one of the Cubo members, played the game and ended up killing every single killable NPC in the game. So you can really play the game however you want and kill basically whoever you want, but you'll need to live with the consequences of doing so. You have to pick and choose who you eat and kill. It's really interesting how it all works. It's a great game and one you should definitely look into because, to me, it's severely underrated.
The Surge games are both Souls-likes and a must-play for people who want more of that Souls feel. They are both challenging games and have very similar mechanics, but what sets this game apart is the unique targeting system. In a normal Souls-like, you can just target an enemy and it follows them, but in these games, it's a bit more complicated, but in a good way. Once you lock onto a target, you are able to move where you are targeting on the enemy's body to target the weaker spots. If an enemy isn't wearing a helmet, you can target their head to deal the most damage when you hit them. If you are getting annoyed by the weapon they are using, you can target the arm of the weapon and cut it off so you can easily finish the enemy off. Once you cut off certain body parts, you will then get blueprints for the armor or weapon you cut off to use on yourself. This mechanic allows you to fully understand your enemy and get their gear to be more powerful. It is one of the most unique aspects of this game that make it so good. If you are itching for more Souls-likes, then you can get both Surge games for pretty cheap, and it's totally worth it.
The 2D side-scroller Noita is a physics-based destruction game where you play as a wizard. The game looks a lot like Terraria, but is honestly nothing like it. It lets you craft powerful spells, ranging from ones that would destroy you instantly, or even take out half of the visible terrain. Noita is very unforgiving, and many people might actually give up on this game before actually getting a lot out of it. If you do manage to beat the game, you'll then realize that you've actually only beaten the tutorial of the game, and there's way more than you ever expected. It's not often that I put hundreds of hours into any video game, but this is one I somehow never get tired of. The world holds some of the most interesting and most complicated secrets of any game I've ever seen. To give you an idea of what you can do without spoiling, you can literally change matter and elements throughout the entire universe, launch rapid-fire nukes at enemies, one-shot overpowered gods, and create the actual sun in the sky. The things this game makes possible are kind of ridiculous, but somehow the devs pulled it off and made it extremely fun. You start off so weak that even tiny little spiders could one-shot you, but you end the game as an untouchable god. It's highly addicting, and it's one of my favorite games of all time.
Help him understand what has happened to the town and get him through the tape. Is there anybody out there? Hello?
I'd argue at least a third of you watching this video right now have never heard of Insound Mind. Insound Mind is a first-person horror story game with a pretty in-depth story, characters, and puzzles. We here at Cubold found this game randomly a couple years ago and played it for our podcast, Cublecast. We didn't have great expectations for the game, but man did it blow us away. The game, albeit low budget, has such a great story and unique premise. The gameplay and the way things are laid out are done so well, and it's just so different from other games. It definitely leaves an impression. Like I said, the game just doesn't have a lot of attention and never really gained a whole lot of traction. Unfortunately, it is an indie game that has a small audience but deserves so much more.
When it comes to open world games, an idea probably pops into your head. A game with a huge sprawling world full of life and tons of things to do. What if we told you that Mad Max is a barren wasteland where points of interest are dirty and are full of crazy people? If you know anything about the world of Mad Max, you will know that a game might sound kind of boring, but it's quite the opposite. It's a game that's mostly a driving game, but has a ton of other aspects like car combat, hand-to-hand combat, and weapons to use. It's kind of hard to explain what exactly this game is, but everything about this game is extremely underrated. The story is also extremely good, and it is one of our favorite games. You go around and uncover bunkers, upgrade your vehicle, help out settlements, and a ton of other things. The game itself will take you 30 to 40 hours just to complete, and it just sucks you in from the very beginning. It's also extremely cheap, as you could probably find it for a couple bucks on a sale. Yes, the barren wasteland might look like it's empty, but believe us, there is a ton of stuff to do, and it is one of the best games you can play. It isn't for everyone, but we ask that you just at least give it a try if you haven't already.
Well, howdy, stranger. Seems you're getting along just fine.
When Bugsnax came out as an actual launch title on the PS5, the memes about this game were endless. The PS5 was advertised as a next-gen console, but then you get a game that looks worse than the average PS4 game, with really odd characters that looks like it's made for kids. The game honestly does look ridiculous, and we played it mainly just to make fun of how bad it was. Surprisingly, the story was actually fairly interesting, and it kept me hooked all the way through. To summarize the story, you play as a reporter that goes to an island where the residents are addicted to eating creatures known as Bugsnax. It explores the backgrounds of a weird cast of characters as they face their demons and try to solve an ancient mystery. On the surface, it absolutely does look like a little kid's game, but it never fully takes itself too seriously. After playing for a bit, you'll realize that it covers some darker and more serious topics than it starts out with. It's one game that I never thought I'd actually play, but I'm really glad that I did.
Hunt Showdown has got to be one of, if not the best tactical extraction shooter I've ever played. Even more than just an extraction shooter, the game is just solid all around. The atmosphere, the lore, the gunplay, the candid gunfights and conversations you have with other players, it just works so well together. The game came out in 2019 and has been pretty consistent in terms of its player count ever since then, but the game never really popped off. This time period was when things like PUBG, Fortnite, and soon to come Warzone were starting to really take over the online live service game scene. So I think it's safe to say that the game got lost in the mix. People who play the game love it, and whenever I play it, it's always such a great time. I think the issue isn't that the game is bad or people don't like it, it just didn't release at an optimal time and never seemed to really grasp on a larger audience. The game is and always will be great. Unfortunately, it just hasn't shown up on many people's radar and is severely underrated.
Every one of these games were made with passion from the developers and are some of the best experiences you could find. You're probably tired of AAA games that have been coming out that are unfinished and boring, so why not go check these games out if you haven't already? Let us know down in the comment section below if you like any of these games or if you picked one up because of this video. Also, if you enjoyed the video, feel free to subscribe as it helps get our video out to more people. We also have a gaming podcast called Cast where we talk about gaming news and games that we've been playing. Thanks everyone for watching, and we will see you in the next video.